Hi, I'm Julian, and this is Julian's Front Row Theater. Today I'm going to tell you about my experience seeing the Crow's Theater and Musical Stage Company production of Natasha, Pierre, and the Great Comet of 1812. This production is in Toronto at the Royal Alexandra Theater through August. As someone who's seen the original Broadway production and was fortunate enough to go backstage, let me tell you something. This production proves that you don't need to gut the theater to make the show work. For those of you who might not know, Natasha, Pierre, and the Great Comet of 1812 is adapted from a 70-page excerpt of Leo Tolstoy's epic novel War and Peace. The story focuses on several aristocratic families, focusing on Natasha Rostova, a young, naive countess who is engaged to marry Andrei, who is away at war. Throughout the events of the musical, she is seduced by the devious Anatole Kuragin, and the musical explores the consequences of this seduction. It is known for featuring an eclectic score ranging from traditional musical theater to Russian folk to experimental electronic music. The original Broadway production was famous for transforming the Imperial Theater into a Russian supper club. They literally removed the proscenium and had audiences sitting at tables while actors served pierogies. So when I heard that Toronto was doing this production in a typical proscenium theater, I was skeptical. How do you capture that immersive magic without gutting the building? Well, they figured it out. The Royal Alexandra Theater is this gorgeous Beaux-Arts space, and instead of fighting the proscenium, set designers Julie Fox and Joshua Quinlan embraced it. They've captured the Russian supper club aesthetic with lush red fabrics, gold filigree accents, and a multi-level playing space, including a balcony that extends towards the mezzanine on both sides. One element of the set design that I particularly enjoyed was that there was a wall of mirrors backing the upper level of the set. On this wall of mirrors, it would reflect the chandelier that was hanging over the stage, but there was also this central circle that would light up at different moments to represent both the moon and the titular Great Comet. It was understated but incredibly effective for the space. One staging element that I thought was particularly impressive was this central square turntable on stage that the ensemble would manually rotate at different points throughout the show. This was thematic because the aristocracy's drama could only be played out thanks to the labor of their servants. The turntable adds a great sense of movement to this production. When Natasha leaves her fraught encounter with the Bolkonskis, she runs out of their house onto the turntable, and it rotates around and around before she finds stillness and sings her song No One Else to the Moon. Also, Balaga, the troika driver, stands on the upper level, and his reins are connected to the turntable on the stage below to form his troika. Broadway was known for a great amount of audience interaction, with audiences sitting at tables and actors serving pierogies. Just like the Broadway production, the Toronto production passed out egg shakers to get the audience involved in some of the musical numbers like Balaga. There is on-stage seating at this show on either side of the stage, and George Krissa as Anatole, who is absolutely magnetic, interacts with the audience throughout the evening, flirting and dancing with some of the female audience members on stage. The prologue introduces Anatole as being hot, and this production definitely leans into that. Lots of hip thrusting. What surprised me was how connected I felt sitting in a more traditional proscenium stage setup. I felt completely connected to the production. Director Chris Abraham and choreographer Ray Hogg make great use of the available playing space, including the aisles. The audience was very engaged throughout the performance. Let's talk about the cast because they're universally excellent. Hailey Gillis as Natasha perfectly captures her naivete and impulsiveness in a very emotionally turbulent performance. And Evan Buliung as Pierre. Both of them act through their songs and discover emotional beats very naturally. I saw Danae Benton and Josh Groban on Broadway. Love Danae Benton on The Gilded Age, by the way. While Danae Benton and Josh Groban both sounded exceptional in their performances, I think the actors in the Toronto production did a better job at acting the songs without the need to sound quite so perfect. Their seasoned acting experience really pays off. George Krissa as Anatole nails the role's vocal acrobatics and had the audience eating out of his hand. There was this extended shirtless scene during Charming that they added, and wow, that's all I have to say. Divine Brown as Helene. This is always one of my favorite roles in the show, and her riffs and runs really breathe fresh life into this song that's already so great. She nails Helene's role as the temptress that pushes Natasha into falling for Anatole. Louise Petra as Maria, Natasha's godmother, left a little to be desired. Grace McLean's performance in the original Broadway production was very fierce, and Louise Petra's performance was a little more understated, and her Maria was stately and older without some of that vocal ferocity. Vanessa Sears as Sonia, Natasha's cousin and closest ally, brings powerhouse vocals to the role, but her performance of Sonia alone was lacking some of the emotional depth and dynamics that I was expecting. I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to shadow one of the stage managers during the original Broadway run of The Great Comet. One of the things that I really remembered was that the show had almost 2,000 lighting cues. This Toronto production probably had a similar number, with Kimberly Petrell's lighting design including chandeliers, candelabras, light strips, and that luminous circle on the mirrored wall. While the Broadway production was kind of a massive spectacle, this version was a little more intimate, and a great example of that was how they pulled off the Great Comet at the end of the show. On Broadway, they had these massive chandeliers that lit up with this eerie sound effect for this blinding moment at the end of the show. In the Toronto production, the glowing circle of light on the mirrored walls doubles as the comet and the moon, which was a little disappointing to me, but it painted a good stage picture when that glowing circle lit up and some beams of light were reflected from the mirror onto the stage to form the comet's tail. What this production proves is that the Great Comet doesn't need to gut a theater or have a massive budget to make the show work. In some ways, this more traditional staging makes the performance more accessible while maintaining the show's unique theatrical magic. My biggest wow moments of this production were numbers like the opera, the duel, and Balaga, big ensemble numbers where you really get a sense of the eclectic musical styles brought to life by some amazing actor-musicians, some very detailed period costumes, and incredible audience interaction. So should you see this production if you loved the show in New York? Absolutely. This production captured the spirit of the Broadway show while introducing some cleverly staged moments that surprised and delighted me as a fan of the original production. Should you see this if you missed the Broadway production? 100%. This might be an even better introduction to the show with its more accessible traditional staging that loses none of the transportive power of the show. This was a 5-star production for me. Transportive and rousing, lush and emotional. If you can make it to Toronto before August 24th when this show closes, it is absolutely worth your time and money. I'm Julian, and this is Julian's Front Row Theater. I review shows and react to news from the perspective of someone who's been a lifelong theater fan and who's worked in the industry in New York City. Subscribe for honest takes on everything from Broadway to regional theater to movie musical adaptations. Have you seen a production of The Great Comet before? How did your experience compare? Let me know in the comments.